Well, thank you all for joining us. My name is Scott Badeau, and as I just mentioned, I am recording this meeting at the request of previous participants who either want to go back and listen to it later or couldn't make the time today and want to hear what everybody has to say. That said, it'll be basically forwarded along to those who have RSVP'd and so forth. That won't be a wide distribution. I don't think you're gonna see it popping up on any Google results anytime soon. So we want this to be a candid conversation amongst friends. I'm very excited to have our presenters and facilitator here today. So I'll let them introduce themselves later, but Laurel from F5, Libby from Waters, and John Ragsdale from TSIA will be sprinkling in some great commentary and context to that. After the presentations, we will have sort of a 30-minute open space type of dialogue where we can have more broad discussions around these topics, but please feel free to interrupt the presenter as they're going through, either through coming off of mute or posting something in the chat, and I can sort of queue those up. And, I've looked at the presentations in advance and would know whether that'll be answered later or, might want to be interrupted. And then, as I mentioned, John will, he's got a tremendous amount of experience, despite my typo on LinkedIn post, around what, TSIA member companies are doing in these topics. And so we're really fortunate to have him here. And then we want to hear from, you all as well on what your company or organization is doing, some of the challenges that you see and ideas for overcoming them. This is just a collection of friends. We happen to be using my Coveo Zoom meeting, but otherwise it's just, those of us that have worked together in the past. And so it's just a very informal group. And then at the end, we do have 2 Amazon gift cards to give away, $75. And those are my attempts at bribing people to ask questions or participate in the collaboration, because you have to do one of those in order to be eligible for that prize. And then finally, we'll be making a donation to the International Committee for the Red Cross, specific to their Ukraine fundraiser. I think everybody's obviously aware of the issues going on over there. And, frankly, I sort of organize these things. So I pick things that are near and dear to my heart. One of my best friends from college is from the Ukraine and is back over there with his family and has been sort of skirting around the country trying to avoid bombs blasting near his house. So, I sort of tried to funnel him personally some money as well as for the broader effort. And then lastly, I'll say that before I shut up and hand it over to our 3 distinguished presenters, one of my passions with these efforts is to, sort of do some good while we get together. Salesforce does these at Dreamforce, et cetera. So I think they're great. And to that point, at a previous TSIA happy hour, we raised funds, and then I made a donation at one of our previous KM Best Practices events for a teen center here in Prescott where I live. So I just wanted to show you guys, they just opened the building, and it's just an awesome space. We've got this huge area here where kids can come after school and, play pool, play pinball, that sort of thing. This amazing mural that was painted up there. I'm actually in the room that they do tutoring in, but they rent it out during the day while kids are in school, to folks like us who want to work remotely. And then downstairs is a band practice room where I was showing John and Libby and Laurel. There's a bunch of 45 records hung up on the wall with inspirational, statements on them. From my family, we wrote, because we're AC/DC fans, it's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll. So I just had a lot of fun getting together with everybody, and appreciate everybody attending today. And with that said, unless I forgot any housekeeping items that my 3 colleagues can remind me of, I will hand it over to them.
All right. I think I am going to go first. So let me share my screen. Got a few slides. And I think, David, you're going to see that there's a few that are familiar to you from a previous talk that we did with the consortium. But so hi, everybody. Great to see you. Great to see some familiar faces. Laurel Poertner, Senior Director for Digital Services at F5. And I am going to talk a little bit about some of the things I've been doing the last 3 years that I've been at F5 with the evolution of employee engagement and also KCS and coaching, and would love to hear your comments and any questions, and you know, at any time you can stop me. Just a little bit about me. The mountains are my happy place, and I live in Seattle with my husband and 13, almost 14-year-old daughter, 2 dogs who you may hear woofing, so just be prepared if somebody comes to the door. I've lived in Seattle all my life, which is actually a rarity around here, so I'm very used to 9 to 10 months of rain. But luckily, I grew up actually going to this lovely place called Sun Valley, Idaho. We would jump in the station wagon and drive 11 hours. But it was absolutely worth it once you got there. And now I get to go here and take my daughter and enjoy it. And I actually, over the last couple of years, was able to work from here. And I started thinking about this just in our theme today of the pandemic and remote work. And there are some good things that have come out of remote working. Scott was talking about, you know, being on his bike or skiing or taking calls. And so there's definitely some perks. But I'm also going to talk about some of the challenges that we've seen, but also how we've overcome it and how it's pretty amazing how adaptable people are. So real quick, I'm just going to give a quick overview of F5, anybody who's not familiar with who we are, and then a little bit of our coaching journey, just kind of how it went for us, and the great resignation, but I'm calling it the great change, and you'll see why. And then just, you know, discussion, any questions and comments. Sound good? All right, so real quick, just F5, we power the world's apps, and 48 out of the Fortune 50 companies use F5. If you've done any banking, for example, on your phone, you've gone through probably an F5 product. So just it's kind of the backbone of the internet. The plumbing is what we call it. I am in the support services organization, and so we're a global organization, 24/7, over 500 support engineers, primarily tiered for now. And we implemented KCS back in 2017 and are ISO 9000 certified. So that's about us. Before I get into kind of talking about coaching, I wanted to bring up this quote that I thought was so interesting and poignant. And I would like to read it to you just for emphasis. And it's actually from Donna Eby, who is a wisdom weaver. How about that title? From the International Coaching Federation. And she was talking about the future of work. And I just thought this was, you know, she said, we've gone from a very different demand in the market, which is almost more around creativity and innovation, to community, cultures of belonging, adaptive thinking, and collaboration. It's completely changed overnight, literally in a month. It pivoted, and people and organizations were asking for programs around humans connecting. How do we get a culture of belonging and a hybrid workforce? And I think that this absolutely spoke to me and is something that we have been having conversations with leadership and, people on my teams. Just how do we get that connection that we have been needing when we've been working remotely? So So let me just give a quick overview of our coaching journey. And before I started at F5, we launched a knowledge management tool, and true to form, everyone just said, here you go use it. And guess what happened? Nobody used it. And so they started to look at, okay, how are we going to do this? How are we going to get people engaged and, find the what's in it for me? And they said, KCS, let's do KCS. So spent a lot of time learning, and not only about KCS, but just about the culture and what it takes to launch it. And then I started in 2019, and we did a relaunch of KCS with an assessment and design session and all those things. We also decided that it would not be worth doing that without coaching. And I remember the day that one of the knowledge engineers did a presentation to our leadership, and he said, here are the number of companies that have successfully implemented a knowledge sharing program. And he brought up a completely blank slide. And so we really just invested in, we enlisted some help from Beth Haggett with Thrive from Dr. Beth, and she helped us learn about coaching, how to be a good coach. We used an organizational network analysis with the help of Melissa George, who was in the audience, and we were off and running. So what we started out with, typical best practice of, a smaller group. We started with our Liberty Lake office in Eastern Washington, had just 6 coaches, and started teaching people how to do coaching sessions and what that all looked like. It was pretty amazing to see the engagement where people would come to these classes and go away like, I have never been to a class like this. It was amazing that I'm not talking about work. I'm just talking about human beings talking to each other, actively listening, showing up for one another. And it was a class about that. And they were just absolutely amazed that a company was investing in their well-being. And so it was really, really fun. We were just getting our stride, eating cake, having wine. And then everything shut down in early 2020. And so it was like, okay, now what do we do? And everything was in person. I mean, everything was designed for human, interaction face to face. So we had to really pivot and adapt everything. And what we did, one of the things we did was we created this grow tool to help facilitate, these sessions with people so that we could have a little bit of structure. And what we didn't realize is that it was going to give us all of this rich data. And people, it took a little while. It was a tool. And so, remember to write down, what you were talking about, what goals you were, that the learners were establishing for each other. And so, took a little bit of time to kind of get used to some of that. But then we had all of this wonderful data that we were able to present to the leadership teams and say, look at what people are getting out of this. And so then we started to say, okay, this was really about advancing knowledge sharing and KCS. And what else can we do where we need people to help each other further advance, develop themselves in the organization. And so we're starting to use coaching with that. And a lot of them were just doing that on their own. I mean, some of the testimonials that I heard from people where I just had a coaching session and my learner came in and they had gone to a class to be taught about some sort of technology. and they told me all about it. I mean, we literally took the whole hour of coaching and they told me what they learned. So guess what that did? It helped cement all of what they learned, because they had to teach it to someone else, their coach. And then they were excited about something that they learned. They were actually able to, connect with someone and say, hey, this is good for me. And went off and learned more and practice it with their coaches, or I'm sorry, with their customers. So anyway, that was pretty exciting to see. So we're now dealing with what we're calling the Great Resignation. And what we have found is that about 2/3 of the organization is actually just advancing. And they, the attrition, especially in support, which has, I think, been pretty typical for, a lot of years, that it's the entry point to the company. And so people are now looking at, career advancement. And so what we have found is that a lot of our coaches are enabling people to do that, and they themselves are actually advancing. And that was something, John, you asked me about, was have we made that, coaching as, something that could actually be, put on your resume and put into a criteria to advance? And the answer is yes. So to get to your next level in your career path, or if you are interviewing for, something new in product management or over into consulting, engaging with a coach or being a coach absolutely has helped people get those jobs. So it's pretty exciting to see. The other thing that we saw was just better habits, which that's why we do coaching. But now we have the data to show that there is absolutely a correlation to people who are engaged with a coach in the last 30 days and how they reuse knowledge and close cases in this case. So this is one of the data points that we've been looking at. But it was pretty astounding to see. We didn't actually have any other data points other than looking at the average time to close and whether somebody engaged with a coach. So it didn't actually, check to see if they did, something they were supposed to do in the coaching session. But I believe that this is, people's lives were enriched because they had someone that was showing up for them, that was there encouraging them to do better. And it really, so you could pick probably any data point, right, to say, did you do better in whatever it was that you were doing? So the challenge that we're now seeing is that we are sending people off and they are, getting better at what they do, and they're finding other opportunities. And we're doing better for the company, which is creating knowledge, sharing it for our customers to find it. And guess what happens? Customers come to us for new, more complex issues. At the same point, we're losing some of our tenured people. And so we're now seeing this kind of perfect storm where we've got people that are leaving support for good or bad, mostly good from what we've seen. But our tenure, less than a year tenure, has gone up 8% just in the last year. And so our escalations are climbing because they just don't have the time. Plus, like a lot of people were releasing more products, higher complexity. So it's taking longer for people to become more proficient in their job. we know that coaching is absolutely needs to be part of this equation. There's challenges with that, which is like everything else, you need to invest, you need to set aside time for that development. So I'm really interested in just what people are doing about this. Are they seeing the same things? How are you setting aside time with your teams to develop and learn, with some of these more complex products and things like that? So I'm going to leave it there because I've done a lot of talking, but I want to hear from all of you, and John and Libby too. So,
Laurel, I had a bit of an epiphany as you were talking about this. I've had a great opportunity to work with you and a lot of the folks on your team at F5. And if the rest of you aren't that familiar with F5, if you're ever looking for a best-in-class example of just about anything, you can go to them. Your DEI program, your employee engagement program. I think you've gone through like 6 chatbot pilots trying to figure out the perfect way to do chatbots. But what occurred to me when you're talking about the coaching is, to me, it has a lot of overlap with employee engagement, because it's how do you invest in each employee's success.
right.
But the aha moment for me was thinking about, last week I had an opportunity to spend some time with Naracha Techa Kunavid, who's the EVP of Success at Salesforce. And we were talking about a week into the pandemic, they mandated empathy training for all employees.
Oh.
And the focus was making sure you were being mindful of what customers were going through, difficult, professional and personal. But I think it also applies to the way we work with other employees. And, having worked in KM programs and done KM training for a lot of years, one of the things I learned very early on is the single biggest driver for success or failure was not process or technology, it's culture. And I'm wondering if this interest in empathy and the focus on employee engagement is helping companies with that culture issue, and if ultimately we're going to find more collaborative knowledge sharing cultures as a result, even though that wasn't the primary reason for doing that. I see Libby shaking your head. Are you seeing that as well?
I think that's so fascinating what you're talking about. And I touch on this a little bit in my presentation as well, that I think the things that we are all realizing through the Great Resignation, we're realizing this is happening for our customers and this is happening for us.
Mm-hmm.
That these don't make us so different. And that when we are looking at how are we being empathetic and supportive to our customers, which is something that many of us have gotten so good at, how do we turn that and say, how are we being empathetic and supportive of ourselves? How are we being empathetic and supportive of each other? And isn't this something that we're all doing together? Maybe this can be one of those things. Maybe one of the silver linings is that this brings us all a little closer together.
Yeah, that's really cool.
The other thing that you said, John, that made me think, you said that we've tried to do a bunch of different chat bots at F5, but to me that speaks to the culture that we try and then we try again and we try again, and so to me this is what culture is. It's people doing like things and being in a safe environment to do that. So yes, we fail all the time, and that's part of having that engagement. It's like I'm okay with going and doing something that I've never done before, because I'll learn, and I'm not going to be I'm not going to be punished or anything because I didn't do it right the first time. So yeah.
Yeah, great comment from Michael about we learn from failure. At my time at Forrester, the Forrester CEO always said, if you're not failing at least 20% of the time, you're not trying hard enough. And I think that's another thing that we've all become a little more comfortable with, shifting to remote work and having to do things differently is I think we're a little more comfortable failing.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's an old saying, but it's so true that you learn so much more from your failures than your successes. And the people who are terrified of failure never take the risk that's required to succeed. And, you know, I'm always encouraging companies to try some crazy things and know going into it, there's a high likelihood of failure, but you will learn so much from that process. And, you know, I'm hoping that is also part of this culture changes. We're really encouraging people to stretch and be innovative and transformative. And that does not come without healthy doses of failure along the way.
I think it's important to acknowledge the company culture allowing that failure. I feel very fortunate to be working at a company right now that is just like you're talking about, John. You know, like if you're not trying crazy, wacky things, then you're just not trying hard enough. And but it's not always that way. And so I think that KCS and the type of people that are attracted to KCS and thinking about KCS, you know, we understand that knowledge is never complete. It's always changing. It's always evolving. So it kind of leads to a like-minded individual who's willing to try things. And I feel like I've learned two things in my career. One, when you are in a healthy company that accepts risk, to push the boundaries and run as fast as you can, and don't be towards change, towards trying new things, because leadership can change. And that's one of my biggest regrets, is not trying crazy enough things when I do have support. Because we can come to places like this and talk about it and talk about pitfalls and, you know, Laurel, have you done this before? What'd you learn? There's people to hold your hands.
Yes.
And then the other thing is that when you're not in an organization that is as comfortable with failure, you know, how to thrive and how to push the envelope there. I'm really fortunate to be in the camp of I'm really supported. So anyway.
Well, working where you do, I think that truly is a part of your corporate culture. You know, I tend to see that executive level people get this and entry level people get this, but no offense to anyone on the line, but usually it gets bogged down in middle management.
Yep.
Where they're, you know, they're not really looking at the big picture, and they're too focused on slavish devotion to processes and cost control. And I don't know what happens to us when we go from those young, innovative people into middle management. We kind of shed that, and then you have to learn it again if you're going to, you know, move up. But
question on that: how much do you think fear plays into that? Because when you're starting out, you're almost fearless, and at executive levels, you've overcome it.
Well, I always get in trouble when I talk about making assumptions about certain traits that are specific to certain age groups. So, you know, I'm not saying everybody's the same because of your age group, but you know, the baby boomers did have that mentality that you got a job and you stayed there till you retired, and they were less, you know, they were risk averse and didn't want to rock the boat. And, you know, you look at millennials and Gen Zs who on average plan to work for 20 different companies in their lifetime, where baby boomers average 3 to 4. And they are not afraid of anything because they know they can go out and find another job, probably for more money, and it's going to be really easy. You know, I'm in Silicon Valley, and, you know, if you can't find another job in a week, you're probably not in the right field, because it's really, really difficult. So yeah, I think, but it absolutely is part of corporate culture. And I know a lot of companies that everyone is terrified of failure, and you are called out publicly for your failure. And you know, if that's the environment you're in, I would encourage you to go elsewhere, because you know, I think that's what the Great Resignation has been doing for some companies, because obviously some companies are being hit with it more than others. And when you see entire departments rotating in a year, somebody at the executive level needs to say, we clearly have an issue. It's not just everybody's leaving their jobs. There are patterns to what departments are seeing massive turnover. So yeah, it's a great learning opportunity, and I hope executives take that.
The other thing that you made me think of, Brian, on the fear is that, especially middle management and, you know, the the slavish devotion to process, it's also the metrics and being measured on everything. And to me, that's where the fear is, like, I'm going to miss my number, and I'm going to blame people for missing those numbers. And so that to me is something that I have been doing since I got to F5, and it's just like, please stop measuring people, especially with activity-based metrics. But even when you're getting into some of the outcomes, somehow they turn it into into a number and driving to a number. And it's so hard to get that culture out. I mean, it's even if you have a lot of, you know, enlightened people, there are still pockets that just literally it's ingrained in them. They can't not look at a metric or a graph or a report and say, where is that? Where, you know, and so any opportunity to say, okay, so what if we don't meet that? What's going to happen?
Yeah,
know?
Laurel, you're definitely channeling Phil Vergas, who's in the room.
I see him. He's right.
And this is something that Phil always pushes back on me, because TSIA is so into the data and the metrics, and
Yeah.
you know, trying to correlate processes to metrics. And yeah, it's really easy to lose the big picture. And we find that all the time with companies that are benchmarking, that they're so internally obsessed with these metrics, and they go through benchmarking, and turns out they're a million miles ahead of every other company on those metrics that they're beating themselves up on, but they're completely ignoring these other areas where they're way behind the industry because they're just obsessed with the wrong thing, and you're losing sight of the big picture.
Mhm. Right.
You know,
Well,
I just had a couple of comments here. I think this whole conversation about middle management, it also gave me, you know, some thought here, because I've really been challenged, I think, being in middle management for the last many years. And I have to say, I've always thought of where I sit as like I'm in an estuary, right? We all know what an estuary is, where the fresh water and the salt water meet, where the oceans and the rivers come together, and it's this kind of like mixing of two different types of two different bodies of water. And I have to say, there really is a challenge with that conversation that's happening at a senior leadership level that happens towards middle management. And then the completely different conversation that happens with middle management to the lower tiers, and the younger generations, et cetera. And I think that companies I've been with where we've had leadership that was much more connected at all levels, that has not been as much of a problem. I will tell you right now at Zoom, one example that I've seen is that Eric Yuan, he delivers all hands every 2 weeks. Every other Thursday, he has an all hands directly with every single person in the company, and he's delivering that message right down to the lowest ranks and everybody in between. And I think that has probably been the most effective. Most traditional, you know, blue chip companies I've worked for, some terrible, like, rhymes with Schmomcast, that like they they might give an all hands once every quarter. The leadership, you don't hear from them on a regular basis, and they really struggle with getting that message down to the lower ranks. And then middle management gets caught in the middle with translating from above down. And that really is where knowledge sharing and this notion of collaboration begins to break down very quickly. So just my thoughts and observations.
Hey gang, this is Scott. Great conversation, but I want to give Libby a chance to do her presentation. So could we shift over there and we can always revisit other topics towards the end?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Libby,
Thank you. So I am actually, for presenting, I am going to stop sharing my video because I am getting some bandwidth warnings. And then I am going to go ahead and share my screen. So I love this conversation, and I think my presentation is going to go into this conversation really well. So let's make sure that I am presenting the correct deck here, and I will go into presentation mode. So while I'm getting this all queued up,
and Libby, we can see your presenter one instead of, you might want to switch to the other monitor if you're in presentation mode.
I need to just go like this.
Yep,
how's
you're
that?
good now. Thank you.
Fantastic. So my name is Libby Healy, and I have started 2 net new KCS programs, both at tech companies. And now I am at Waters Corporations, where we are more biotech. And I am also working within knowledge management. So most of my career has been within support and knowledge management. I have done brief stints in development and operations, but I always keep coming back to support because this is truly my home. And today, what I would like to talk about is knowledge management in the age of COVID, the Great Resignation, and beyond. And I would like to start off with a quote. And this says that knowledge is different from all other resources. It makes itself constantly obsolete so that today's advanced knowledge is tomorrow's ignorance. And the knowledge that matters is subject to rapid and abrupt shifts. And this is a quote by Peter Drucker. And even though this quote is from 1997, I think it is so relevant to what we are talking about today. Just like COVID driving so many to work from home offices highlighted the importance of getting remote work right, the Great Resignation is a rapid and abrupt shift that is putting a bullet on the importance of content evolution. None of this is new. Current circumstances are simply highlighting its importance. So I would like to talk about driving your content evolution in the age of the Great Resignation. I want to start with giving you a brief overview of Waters Corporation and our KCS program. But then I want to talk about knowledge evolution and the hero's journey. And finally, we're going to end with my new mantra, and that is perfectionism is wisdom's kryptonite. Okay, so Waters Corporation. Waters Corporation is the worldwide leader in liquid separation science. So what you see on your screen right now is a scientist working with a liquid chromatography machine. We also make mass spectrometers. So there's really no layman's terms for what Waters does. The pharmaceutical segment represents Waters' largest sector. So it's safe to say that if you have ever taken a pill, or more relevant to today's conversation, a vaccine, more than likely the research for that medication was done on Waters equipment. So to say that our clients were on the forefront of COVID-19 research and vaccine development would be an understatement. So we design, manufacture, and sell and service all of our own technology. So it's not unusual within the support vertical to work with people who have their advanced degree or even their PhD in chemistry. The work that we do in support is extremely technical. And for this reason, we started a KCS program back in 2016. In support, we have folks that are on the phone in our expert centers, but we also have big teams in the field supporting our clients. Both of these are global. And if you think phone support is expensive, ask me about a global field service support industry. I think this group is familiar enough with KCS methodologies and benefits that I'm just going to leave those there. And I want to briefly touch on this timeline so you understand where we are in our KB evolution. So we started our KCS program in 2016 with a small group of cross-functional teams and really got traction in article creation in 2017. And then in the next year, we did a soft launch of our client portal. And then the next 2 years, these were really spent driving our KCS program, writing articles, and trying to gain visibility for our client self-help portal. And then in 2020, we all know what happened. And for all of the heartache and hardship that was 2020, it was really great for our KCS program. Suddenly, everyone at Waters was hyper-focused on making sure that our global support teams and our field service agents and our clients all had access to every piece of information that they needed. And it drove what we called remote fixes within client support. Now, at this time, we diligently drove the information to knowledge evolution of our KB, while simultaneously increasing the visibility of our KB with our clients. And this combination was extremely successful. We have seen strong continued year-over-year growth in the number of users and sessions and page views, especially among our clients. So currently, about 40% of our clients go directly to our content, while the same number use a search engine like Google to find what they need. Organic traffic from Google to our client-facing KB is up 54% since 2020. The number of times that we are in the top 10 or even the top 1 spot from a Google search is up, as well as the number of featured snippets showing Waters KB content. So this was all very successful. And as a result, in 2021, our client self-service knowledge base accounted for over $1.5 million in service savings based on deflected service call estimates. So now our KCS program is at a level of maturity that we're starting to bring focus to the information, to knowledge, to wisdom evolution of our knowledge base. And this is not just because we are feeling the impact of the Great Resignation here at Waters, but our clients are experiencing this too. And so often, as I said before, I think we can really focus on how this is just impacting us, this rapid and abrupt shift in the way that we work, but this is happening to everyone to a certain degree. So for the rest of this presentation, I want you to visualize your end users as being on a hero's journey. I've always loved the concept of the hero's journey, especially as it pertains to knowledge. So the hero's journey is a classic tale of triumph that is told over and over in movies and books. So first, our hero is in regular life, and then the challenge comes, and the hero is going through struggle. But along the way, the information that they need starts to present itself. And then the knowledge that they need to start solving problems is there. But then the struggle gets so intense, and somebody along the way drops the wisdom bomb on them that they needed to pull all of the pieces together. And so often the person that's dropping all of this wisdom doesn't even know that they're doing it. And I find this so exciting because as knowledge managers, it is our job to surface the information and the knowledge and the wisdom that our end users need to be successful on their journey. So I have said the words information and knowledge and wisdom several times. Let's just talk about what those are briefly. First, we have information. Information is the what. Information is structured facts with contextualized meaning. So this is product documentation, release notes, fact sheets. It's all very important stuff and the foundation of our pyramid. Next, we have knowledge. So knowledge is the how. In KCS, we have a very crisp understanding of what makes knowledge, and that is information upon which people can act. So if information is the what and knowledge is the how, what is wisdom? Wisdom is the why. Wisdom is knowledge infused with understanding. And here is the key difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge gives us the ability to solve a problem. Wisdom gives us the ability to synthesize new knowledge. In KCS, the solve loop, KCS knowledge is the solve loop, and wisdom is the evolve loop. And we are getting really good at driving the evolution of information to knowledge using KCS practices. But driving the knowledge to wisdom evolution is proving more difficult. And here at Waters, we have started asking ourselves why. Why is adding wisdom to our knowledge so hard? And we're kicking off a new working group to focus exactly on this. But let's talk about this pyramid in the context of the hero's journey. So I have recently started using a new program that takes data and it allows me to write formulas and functions to create an interactive dashboard for my statistics. And while I have experience writing these in other environments, this is different enough that I have been writing what I call the God to fraud roller coaster. So if those of you that do this work, you know exactly what I'm talking about. This is where you are working so hard to get your formula to actually pull back a number and not an error message. And you work and work and work, and then it works. And you think, I am a god in this system. And then 2 hours later, when you can't do the next thing, you think, oh my God, I'm such a fraud. Why did I say that I would do this? And this is the hero's journey. So I have information from this company that I use all the time. I have a list of functions that I can use to create statements that drive my charts. I have this pinned to my start menu because I use it so often. I also regularly go into their KB and their community to find articles on how to use their product. And for the most part of my journey, this is all I need. But when I am stuck, and I mean really stuck, I leave their content and I go to this guy on YouTube who has a channel where all he does is work out problems submitted by other people using this program. And I watch him work. And he is never solving my problem directly, but I watch him troubleshoot and solve problems like mine. And he makes mistakes. And then he shows how he corrects his mistakes. And his mistakes are not because he's bad at what he does. It's because this is complicated work. And every time after I watch him work, I am able to go back to my dashboard and fix my formula. And I often ask myself, why? Why do I have to leave this company's KB to get the wisdom that I need to complete my hero's journey? And this isn't just me. This guy's channel has thousands of hits. And recently, I think I've started to realize something. I think that when trying to communicate wisdom, it's not just about the answer. It's about the journey to the answer. So about a year ago, Lady Coates wrote a book called Subtract, The Untapped Science of Less, where he writes about our drive to add instead of subtract when attempting to improve something. And he says, if we can shift our thinking slightly from add or subtract to add and subtract, new possibilities will occur to us. And I think about this all the time. And this has started creeping into my thoughts about how to add wisdom to our KB. Because if I am honest, I have only been thinking about wisdom as something that needs to be added. So this is an example that I've used in the past. So on the knowledge side, it says, nobody really wants to buy a 1/2-inch drill bit. What they really want to do is drill a 1/2-inch hole. And this is knowledge. This is how. How do you drill a hole? So as a content creator, I might say, I've got this great knowledge article, and it gives me step-by-steps for drilling a hole and a really short video of a master carpenter drilling the perfect hole. This is just what I need. So I find one. And when she is drilling the hole, the bit gets stuck. And she might say something like, yeah, that happens sometimes. See, the spirals or the threads of the drill bit, their primary job is to remove sawdust. When the spiral gets clogged, the bit stops working. Doesn't matter how hard you push on it. What you want to do is back the bit out, clear the clog, and go again. And so she does, and she drills the perfect hole. And there is the wisdom bomb. For somebody who is looking at a knowledge article about how to drill a hole, the understanding that the primary job of the thread in a drill bit is to move sawdust out so the bit can go in. This helps me to synthesize new knowledge about hardwood and softwood and the type of sawdust they make and the distance between my threads and I can do all of this on my own. It's a quantum jump in my knowledge level. But as a content creator, my first instinct would be to tell that master carpenter, would be to say to her, don't worry, we'll just edit that part out. And I know this because I've done it 100 times. Because in my mind, the video can only be so long. And I want something showing the drill and how to drill a perfect hole. But as the saying goes on the wisdom side of this slide, the carpenter has always been more interesting than the drill. As content creators, we are so focused on short, to the point, sufficient to solve content that we encourage the elimination of all else. I know we say that we don't want perfectionism, but then we also say, make sure to adhere to the brand kit, follow the content standard, use the LMS checklist, mind the publishing guidelines, don't forget about the CMS check-in process. This is perfectionism through elimination. And I'm starting to understand that wisdom is not only something we need to add to our knowledge, it's something that we need to stop editing out. Wisdom is messy, like real life is messy, and real life is where the wisdom lives. I think we are mistaking every foible, blunder, and misstep for errors in content, when in fact, they are magic. And so this is my new mantra. Perfectionism is wisdom's kryptonite. And I'm going to keep this in mind for the rest of the year and beyond as we continue to drive the information to knowledge to wisdom evolution of our content. So this is the end, but just for now. All right.
I love your quote. It reminds me of, I think it was Moliere that said, perfect is the enemy of the good. And
exactly. That's kind of what I'm trying to get at with that. Yeah, I think that, and just like we were all saying as we were talking, we need to stop being afraid of our mistakes, that sharing our mistakes actually helps other people grow. And I think intellectually we understand this as leaders. We're really not there with our content. We really truly believe that sharing any misstep or mistake with our content would be bad. Whereas when I was kind of thinking about this, I was thinking, what if we had a knowledge article or a community post that said, here's the answer, but then we have a little button and it says the struggle is real. And you could click on that button and you could see what an expert needed to do to figure out the answer. You would be able to see like all of the jumping around and moving around that the expert needed to do and how much people would learn from that. I would watch The Struggle is Real. Like I would set aside an hour every Friday afternoon and get snacks. I would watch those things for fun. So I'm gonna start encouraging us all to share more of the struggle.
mm-hmm. You know, there's some great comments in the chat, and Laurel, something you said about what if all of the experts could like videotape their knowledge, their problem solving process. And I think that's what's kind of tricky about this concept of going from knowledge to wisdom is the same piece of knowledge will not inspire wisdom in every person. And, you know, I did a keynote at an event last week about bottoms up automation, which I know some of these names were in the audience, but we talked before about the slavish devotion to process. And, you know, one of the challenges is as problems get harder to solve, we're fixated on coming up with the only one way to do everything. And
Right.
The fact is, people come from very different backgrounds and different perspectives, and there may be 1,000 ways to solve that problem. And one way is not better than the other, but one is leveraging the wisdom of that person to have an aha moment about something that would never occur to somebody with a completely different experience. So it's kind of the magic is there in that wisdom.
Exactly. So yeah, this is what I'm playing with right now.
You know, and I also find that when people are struggling with knowledge sharing, they often are like, I don't have anything to write about. And it's, I always say, what did you learn? Just, just write about what you learned. It doesn't necessarily have to be this, I think a lot of people, they have this, like you said, these standards and this expectation that it has to be perfect, or it has to be this, polished thing. It's like, no, what people really want, they want to see how you got there. And because that's how they're going to learn as well. They may not even be looking for that answer. they're just like, how did you actually even know what to ask as your next step?
Right. Right. And while I was kind of thinking of all this, I was thinking, my gosh, so many of my peers are going to call me Faust right now but I'm not saying that we need to change anything about how we create knowledge. I think we're doing a great job at creating knowledge. I think it's that maybe just being open to the fact that more things are knowledge, and knowledge it can have different looks.
Right. I know, Phil, you put in that thinking out loud and part of the collaboration and swarming that people do, that is how people learn, and what can be also written down and shared. So yeah.
Libby, you mentioned YouTube. The survey data that TSIA does on how people want to consume self-service content, they much prefer video than reading text. And it just seems a better paradigm for communicating really the uniqueness of some of people's approaches. If you can watch them doing it, I do think video, but I continue to see companies struggle with capturing more videos, either for employees or customers, because they get so mired down in the PR group's mandate that you have to dress a certain way, you've got to have a certain background. And, customers want to hear it from the frontline person with maybe a difficult accent, or, they don't care. They don't care if they're wearing jeans and a torn t-shirt. They want to hear it from the frontline person and their perspective, not some corporate talking bot.
Right. In fact, this guy that I watch on YouTube, I am not watching him for his production standards at all. I mean, but that's kind of what I love, is that it's so authentic. It's not shiny and polished. This is not a marketing tool. This is just him sharing what he knows. And I have a very old example about my family. We used to fix our same dryer. My husband became obsessed with never throwing away this dryer, and that we would watch YouTube videos on how to fix our washer and dryer. And we would always look for the right person. Like, if you're fixing a washer and dryer, you're going to be kind of dirty, and your pants are going to be hanging a little low, and all of this stuff. And like, that's the authentic human being that we want to watch doing this. So we all know what we're looking for, but for some reason in a corporate environment, we feel like we need to shine it up.
Yeah. Carlos asks an interesting question. Should the knowledge base have a special area tool process for official documentation, like the official source of truth? And let me give my quick perspective, and then I'd love to hear what you two think about that. You see this on communities where customers are suggesting things, and like the owner of the community thread will tag one as the best answer or the accepted answer. But I think we need to also recognize there are very often more than one right answer. From an intelligent search perspective, like a Coveo, I like to see the most popular one. It's like crowdsource, which solution has been tagged to a case the most often or accessed by a customer most often, because they kind of bubble up and you can see they all may be accurate, but some are just easier to consume or more interesting. But what do you think about that? Is there one right answer? Should companies tag something as the official corporate version of the answer?
Laurel, do you have an opinion on this?
I don't know if it's really going to matter, because I think people they're all searching for, certain answers. Michael, I see you on here because I literally tell this story all the time, where he was my part of my beta group for a new site rollout for a support portal. And he said, I don't come to the site when I have a problem. I go to learn stuff. I go to see what's new. I go to see what people are, what's trending, right? What are the things that are bubbling up to the top, and so I think it may be kind of a waste of time to segment it in a certain way, because everybody's coming for a different reason, and they may not even know what they're coming for. They may not have a clue. And to me, that's also where some of the official documentation is written. It has no context in terms of the customer's voice. So they're not going to find it anyway. They're not going to know that that's actually the answer. And that's what we've seen, is that, somebody's got to translate it for them to say, this is actually going to tell you all that you did, all what you were asking for, even though it has no words in there, right? So that's my thought.
Right. So I know in past SaaS environments, there have been multiple ways to do things. The company has the one way that they want you to do it, because if you do it other ways, it can have implications down the line that others might not know about. Let's just make sure that that people understand, chime in on the community and just say, hey, down the line, if you ever want to do XYZ and you're doing it this way, you're going to have to convert a whole ton of data or something like that. But when we look at things, instead of from a process to a jobs to be done framework, there absolutely can be 5 different ways of getting something done. And I think as a company, we are providing a tool. Now, in my current environment, our tools are extraordinarily regulated by the government, and it's not a good example. But other companies, you're providing a tool, and people are going to use that tool however they want to get their jobs done. Let's let people share that stuff.
And something I think we sometimes forget is that customers are living and breathing this technology to do their jobs every day. They have an understanding of how this technology works that the people who make it will never know, because they're going from the product management spec and the document. It's completely different when you're interacting it to get something done in your daily life. So I think it's funny how often customers know more about the technology than the company does.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So people are asking me for my muse on YouTube that I have found. I will put that in the chat. Let me find it.
Please.
He's like hashtag Cheetah or whatever. So this is Smartsheet dashboards is what I was working in. And let me find this guy. Yeah, his videos are like 2 or 3 minutes long. Really simple. Talk amongst yourselves.
And he's not a Smartsheet employee, correct?
No, nope.
Right.
Well, I have a question for the group. Phil and I were having a conversation yesterday about the concept of knowledge first, knowledge enabled, knowledge infused. We've got all this great content, but there's this assumption that you're searching for it to find it. How do we do a better job of getting the information we have to the eyes or the fingertips of the person that needs it in a more proactive way? Because, everybody thinks they don't have enough content, but oh my God, we all have a lot of content. And it's in this ocean that's so difficult to consume. And even regardless of the best search technology in the world, you've got to translate what you're hearing, type in a search result, filter it, and find it. It's difficult. And to me, that seems to be the challenge we need to solve, is how to more proactively serve this amazing information to people at the time they need it in a seamless way, because we're all spending a lot of time searching.
Yeah, John, this is Scott Bedeau. I'm pretty passionate about this subject, given where I've worked for the last while, and for me, it's getting away from using the search box and getting more to proactively pushing knowledge to you based on a very tight contextual integration to the platform that you're working on and the process that you are completing. So I actually hate seeing my clients click the search button, right? They should just be going through a process like setting up a new project. I had this really fun engineering company that, does these huge, massive projects throughout the world, and their, eventual integration looked like, somebody's starting a new project for a big bridge in China. They've never been to China and they've never done this type of bridge, right? So as they're setting it up, they're getting knowledge pushed to them of not only the know-how, like maybe previous project plans or documentation or whatnot, but the know-who, like here's the people that have worked on these types of projects, here's their availability to come onto your project, et cetera. So for me, it's, that little integrated search bar on Google Chrome or, Edge or whatever has really been a problem, I think, for setting the wrong expectations for business. To me, it should be a little more like your Facebook feed, right? Where you're doing something and all of a sudden one action totally changes the next couple things that you see.
Yeah, I completely agree. A good example is how if somebody's creating a support case and Coveo can prompt them with information as they're filling out those fields. I think the future, and what I talked about in my keynote last week, is now that we're seeing sentiment analysis and real-time voice to text becoming affordable for most companies, Amazon's got a plugin that does it. What if while the customer's describing the problem, that the system's hearing it and doing that searching and prompting, so you don't have to wait for the employee to figure out what they're saying, type it in a case. I think we can start doing that proactive prompting of knowledge earlier and earlier and earlier. I mean, wouldn't it be great when a customer submits an email and all of that processing is done, and as soon as you open that, your display suddenly has the solution, the path to solution, the button to click to initiate the solution. All that processing is done in the background before you ever route it to a customer. So Scott, I think you're exactly right. And I think that the trick is going to be how to get it earlier and earlier in the process before you're actually typing it and interacting with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and then, sort of the phase two for me is, I mean, we heard the term next issue avoidance in the CEB book several years ago. And for me, it's going beyond that and saying, as soon as John comes to a resolution on his particular issue with, X, Y, and Z context, and I'm confident of that resolution, I then, as a process or a platform, circle back to everybody in the past who's had X, Y, and Z and either never found an answer or maybe found an imperfect answer, and I proactively notify them about that. I mean, all that said, I think this stuff is really hard to get culturally, right? Because even my $1,400 iPhone suggests that I update the software, and it doesn't even tell me what updates are in there, right? And so large corporations have set a terrible standard, in my opinion, of not telling us what's going on, whereas I think doing so is better for the company and their consumer.
Chris, I love your point about being customer first and writing in the language of the customer, which is why forum conversations, customer communities continue to be such a popular source of information on self-service sites and constantly rising in preferred way that customers want to get info because it's in their language. It's not bogged down in whatever the development team wants to call it. And Michael, just Scott, this is one of my favorite topics. So I think probably 99% of a enterprise's knowledge is locked in email. And I know Coveo and all the other search engines have the ability to index corporate email systems. How many companies, what percent of companies do you see doing that? I'm guessing pretty low.
Yeah. And yet you can even index the email. I mean, us internally, right? My email is indexed. I can go search it really quickly, but then also a search engine can deduce expertise out of conversations that happen in email, so that even if John and Michael don't see my email, they might be able to query a system that says, hey, he's authoring some documents on topic X. He's emailing some folks on topic X. You know, these actions indicate or deduce that he may have some expertise on that. So for me, it's a difference between indexing it for everybody to see versus indexing it for other purposes like expertise identification for, you know, maybe even intelligent swarming.
Right. That's what I was thinking.
So what else do we have going on in chat? This is your opportunity to ask. I mean, all the people I go to for questions on knowledge management are in this group today.
Yeah.
So this is your opportunity to get input from the best and the brightest.
And by the way, there were some conversations in the chat from Laurel's presentation. I'll scrape all these and make sure we circle back to you. But I just wanted to, you know, give Libby's topic enough time.
Hey, Michael, I'm curious what you're talking about with the security issues. Can you say more about that?
We just have different teams, right? And every team has a different perspective. They're doing a specific job. They don't generally interact with another team, right? As a company, we're all working for the same goals, but as a team, they're working in their own space. And so they need their data that they're documenting, their process of procedure and resolutions. They need it from their bent. And they don't necessarily want to share the way they do the work with other teams, not necessarily always dealing with security, but more, they're coming at it from a different perspective. Yeah. So to provide their answer, as well as providing the other team's answer for the same issue, there's really two answers, right? And so one search will bring up these two different results, and it gets confusing and muddy, and it's kind of challenging. But yeah, we also have teams that I don't want to share my content with the rest of the company because it's not appropriate, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, the service desk might really want to leverage both of those pieces of information in order to help the end user customer who's having the problem, right? If we could absorb that data and utilize it, it would be very beneficial. But I understand the reservations for not. So for me, trying to maintain that system and grant as much access as I can, but not too much access, it's challenging.
We've actually, you know, here this is Ann, I work at a security company, and we've gotten a lot of pushback from, you know, our GRC team and for even internal security on sharing any information, from auditing, things like that. Like, why would you need to share this? Why would you want to possibly pull information from email and Slack or even Confluence and put it in your search results in Salesforce, you know, trying to have, you know, that customer feedback in there. So I agree. I'm trying to get it utilized has been, or even implemented, it's been a challenge because of those security concerns.
You know, I find myself asking, why wouldn't you more often? Oh, my apologies, yeah. Scott. I think it's important that you ask the questions, why wouldn't you share? Because I think it's easy for people to immediately just say, we shouldn't share this, and just leave it at that, and not really be challenged with, you know, their reasoning for why. Sometimes they just think they're the only ones that it applies to, and nobody else should really be looking at their content. But like, pushing back on those folks is sometimes that's a hard question.
To that whole culture issue.
Yep.
And
not trusting.
TSIA keeps talking about service convergence, and we're seeing more service lines starting to overlap and reuse resources, and yet they all have their own little source of truth and they never share them. And that siloed information is doing nobody any good when it's locked.
There is more knowledge outside of our knowledge base than there is inside the knowledge base. And I would add wisdom, Libby. There's more wisdom that exists in email chats and chats between, various teams and levels, tiers of people than there is in the knowledge base. It's like, well, wait, as a knowledge manager, how do I get that from you? I need to put that in the KB so everyone can find it.
Right. But to your point, so often in what Jeff was saying, so often people will say, well, I would never want this in an article, but blah, 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 blah. And we do have to start having a conversation. Why wouldn't we want that documented somewhere? And let's not let people, I understand security, but let's not just blanket coat everything with security and let that be kind of the pat answer, because we'll all go, oh, security. But let's dig into that a little bit and ask questions and explore it in a way that's not blaming anybody and not throwing any shame. Let's honestly explore it.
Well, I love your comment. I'm constantly telling people to get over themselves, and I don't really worry about doing it politely.
It does depend on who it is, on how polite I need to be. Sometimes you can be much more direct and pretty much flat out say, you need to get over yourself. This isn't all about you. It's about what's best for the company. And, you've got great information. Share it.
And you're not that special. So.
that is, you're not a unicorn. I also spend a lot of time convincing people they are not unicorn.
Love that. I have to tell you, if your company has a community, or if there's a general space where folks are having that community conversation out in the open, I think sometimes knowledge sharing internally can be challenged by what's going on in the communities. For instance, I've had plenty of engineers and product developers tell me, oh, no, this isn't appropriate for the customers, that we're not going to share this. And then you go to the community and customers are having exactly that conversation about the API, about, whatever code, et cetera. Partners as well. Partners are probably more notorious for that. But I think that sometimes you can leverage the community space to really convince people that this is an appropriate conversation for us to share.
They're going to go get it some way, somehow, somewhere.
You're right. They'll always find a place to talk about it. Yep.
And for customers, you want to be in control of this conversation. The conversation is going to happen somewhere on the internet, a chat room on somewhere. And go ahead. Kathy Sierra always talks about, your customers, we all know this part of the product sucks. It's not a secret to anybody. So let's talk about it honestly together. And let's talk about a solution, or else that conversation will happen somewhere where you won't have eyes on it or control over it.
Yeah, and I would say when it comes to the security question of how to get things sharing more, I think culture and that sort of thing is going to kind of fall on deaf ears. I would use their own terminology with things like least privilege access is something that they will set up for a database, right? Where, not everybody on this call needs root admin access. So how do we divvy that up? And then you say, okay, well, we can set the same up with our knowledge management program, right? So the search engine can only see a few fields that people will search on. And then there's 80 other fields with all the IP addresses and social security numbers and all that sort of stuff that nobody would even, see, let alone the search engine indexing, et cetera. And then you can go through each level of your knowledge management stack and take that approach with them. And let's just say that, I'm breaking my rule of not mentioning Coveo, but I was able to sell a lot of Coveo Cloud stuff 8 years ago when, most of the organization was still doing on-prem, just by using the right terminology with folks and making them comfortable with it. And that's the best advice I give to anybody on any platform, right? Is if you want to share knowledge, use the InfoSec team's terminology. Don't come to them with a culture debate, because that's not going to go very far with them.
Scott, before we run out of time, Mukesh asked this question about should doc views be considered as success. And in the remaining 9 minutes, there's no way we can get into the black hole of deflection calculations, which a lot of I think deflection is a cult following and is typically not really what you should be focused on. But have you done one of these sessions on that topic recently? Because I mean, talk about passionate opinions on a topic.
Yeah, I think that's a great one for next time, because the other thing that we had talked about is the next one being everybody sharing all their biggest mistakes. And so those two go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And we might not record that one to get more candor.
So Laurel's team,
absolutely.
actually, Laurel's KCS team did one of the best presentations that I've ever seen. And it was every single mistake that they made on their KCS program. I've never laughed so hard during a presentation. They did an amazing job. So those are a ton of fun.
I know, and I just saw Adam's here, and he was on there.
Adam, come off of mute.
Yes.
Tell us, was it painful? He's not going.
This is not Adam, but it's always fun when it's somebody else's mistakes you can laugh at.
I'm going to say it. We'll have to be careful not to name names on the mistakes conversation. Most of us have worked together before.
But they're
probably
so
a whole
universal.
slide deck about Scott Badeau. Awesome. Any other, like I said, I'll scrape through some of the chat ones, but anything that anybody's burning to ask before we depart?
I asked a question in the chat, but I was kind of curious, seeing how we have the time, of how much is, and I say ease of use in my question, how much is ease of use like dependent on the actual capture of the knowledge? Michael, you had mentioned that there's so much knowledge outside of our knowledge bases that people don't capture. Is it a mentality of I'm afraid to put something wrong in there, which is a cultural issue, or is it more of a technology issue where whatever medium you're using for your knowledge capture is just, it's burdensome, it's cumbersome,
Yeah.
it's difficult, it takes a lot more time to actually build it versus something that's more streamlined?
Absolutely.
I think it's both, honestly, because if I could just copy the contents of an email and easily create a knowledge article that's knowledge article-y, I would do that. But a lot of times an email is written in too personal a way, and so it doesn't translate very well, or the perspective is off. Honestly, I think if the knowledge workers could take that in its raw form and then massage it into something usable from a knowledge perspective, that would be gold. But
well, and the reuse part of it, that to me, it's like, okay, I will spend the time and write something, and if I can just add it to my email with a click of a button, there we go. That's where I don't want to go find it, copy the URL, put it in there, those, right? So I think the reuse part is absolutely needs to be streamlined too.
And I think one thing, we're taking this quantum jump again in technology. So the folks in the field that are working in the field right now are younger enough from me that they only want to work on their phone. They work their cases on their phone. They're in our knowledge base on their phone. So this not only has to be easy to do on a laptop, I need to make this so that these kids will make knowledge articles on their phone. And so it's like the technology and the want and the need are just kind of spiraling away from me while I'm trying to rewire this plane.
Awesome. Well, I've got an idea to close us out. Jeff Harling hosted the Zoom since he works at Zoom last time and had these fancy polls and everything set up. I'm not as good as that. So what if we all turned on our webcam briefly and gave a thumbs up for anybody who's interested in the next topic being the greatest mistakes ever made in knowledge management? And certainly, measurement metrics could be one of those, but maybe everybody can give a thumbs up if you're interested in that. All right, awesome. There's an old school vote right there.
I think it would be very cathartic.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much to Libby and John and Laurel, as well as everybody who attended. I will send out an email shortly with let's see, the slides download, the video recording should be done here soon, as well as the two $75 gift card recipients. And I will look to schedule that next session in about 3 months, and we'll reach out to a bunch of the thumb raisers to see if you are interested in sharing some of your mistakes. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thanks,
Good to see
Scott.
everybody.
Thank
Bye
you.
all.
Thanks.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.